Hey Fundraiser, I'm Mary Petersen, and this is Hey Fundraiser, the podcast for development professionals who are done guessing and ready to build a major gift program that actually works. Every week, I bring you the tactics, the language, and the real-world strategy to close bigger gifts, deepen donor relationships, and lead with confidence. Whether you're a one-person shop or a seasoned major gift officer, if you're ready to stop hoping and start engineering, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Hey Fundraiser. Today, I want to tell you about something that made me feel genuinely hopeful about the future of fundraising. And I do not say this lightly, because if you're in fundraising right now, especially if you're in major gifts, you know there is so much pressure on us fundraisers. Goals are going up. Teams are often staying the same size or getting smaller. Donor expectations are changing. Boards want bigger gifts. Executive directors want more major gift activity, even if it isn't the right activity. Budgets are tighter. And somewhere in the middle of all this is a fundraiser like you and me sitting at his or her desk thinking, okay, but how exactly am I going to do this? How am I going to go build the relationships? How do I know when it's time to make the ask? What is the best thing I can say to inspire the gift? How do I not sound awkward? What is the best follow-up? Or how do I ask for a bigger gift without feeling pushy? How do I handle a no? How do I stop feeling like I'm bothering people? These are not small questions, fundraiser. These are questions that make or break major gift programs. And today I want to talk about an AFP chapter that decided to actually invest in those questions, not dance around them, not give people one inspiring keynote and then send everyone home with a tote bag and a folder of notes that may or may not ever get looked at again. This chapter did something different. They created a day around major gift confidence. The AFP chapter of Santa Barbara and Ventura counties brought me in to be their keynote speaker for their summer symposium. The whole day was about major gifts, everything major gifts. But the spirit of the day was very clear. This was about helping fundraisers feel more confident in asking for major gifts. And listen, you all know I love that. And it's because confidence is not a personality trait. Confidence is not something you either have or don't have. Confidence is built through preparation and practice and language and repetition. It's built through hearing other fundraisers ask questions that maybe we're afraid to ask. It could be built through the realization of like, oh, I'm maybe not the only one that feels like this. And it's built when someone gives you tools you can actually use. And this is exactly what this AFP chapter did for their members. They didn't just bring me in for a 45-minute keynote and say, okay, let's just inspire everybody. They gave major gifts the entire morning. The entire morning. We spent 2.5 glorious hours together in a deep dive on major gifts. And I mean, it was deep. There was no theory. There was no jargon. There was no fancy phrases that really kind of sound impressive, but really don't help you when you're sitting across a table from a donor and your palms are sweating because you know it's time to ask for a gift. I mean, we talked about the actual work. We talked about cultivating donors using a relationship rhythm. We talked about how to move a donor relationship forward without making it feel transactional. We talked through my 12 ways to ask for a gift. People threw out different scenarios and we talked about what to say and what not to say. We talked about what happens when an ask goes beautifully. And because I believe in telling the truth, we also talked about when things completely bomb. And I shared my horrorist of horror stories about getting a no on my very first solicitation out. But sometimes you make the ask and the donor leans in and says, oh my gosh, tell me more about this. Sometimes you make the ask and you think, oh my gosh, I was so born to do this. And then sometimes you make the ask and you wish the floor would just open up and swallow you whole, which was my case. If you were at that conference, you know. If you know, you know. But that's fundraising. It is human. It is imperfect. It is sometimes magical and sometimes mortifying. And if we can't talk about both the wins and the wipeouts, then we're not actually preparing fundraisers for the real work. So that's what we spent the morning doing. We told the truth about major gifts. There were about 110 people in the room. We were at Ventura College, which has a beautiful campus. And the room had this really fantastic energy from the start. People were warm, they were curious, they were engaged, and they were willing to participate. And that really matters because this was not me standing up there talking at people for 2.5 hours. No, no. This was interactive. It was almost like a conversation. I mean, we laughed, we worked through real scenarios. People asked thoughtful, poignant questions. We talked through language and fear and confidence and what it actually means to build trust with a donor and how to do that. We talked about how to make major gifts feel less mysterious and more doable. And this is one of the reasons I loved the format of the day so much, because sometimes major gifts can feel like this secret club. Like there are fundraisers out there who just know how to do it. They just know what to say. They just know how to walk into a room and ask for $100K or $1 million and just not break a sweat. And then there's everyone else there sitting thinking, why can't I do this? Like, why does this feel so hard? What's wrong with me? The truth is, major gifts is not magic. It is a skill set. It's like a relationship discipline. It's a way of thinking, a way of listening, a way of inviting generosity. And these skills can be learned. That's the good news. You don't have to be born with major gift confidence. You can build it. You can practice it. You can get the language. You can get better. And that was really the heart of the day. Like, it was such a fun morning. The people in the room ranged from brand new fundraisers to like very seasoned fundraisers. And I loved that because one of the things I believe deeply is that major gift fundamentals are never really just for the beginners. If you're new, you need someone to kind of demystify the process. You need someone to say, here is how you start a donor relationship. Here's how you build the momentum. Here's how you know when to make an ask. Here's what to say. Here's how to follow up. But if you're seasoned, you still need those reminders. Like, it's so nice to just get fresh language and different tactics, and you still want to be challenged. And you still need to hear, are you really cultivating or are you just checking in? So I know that's a bit of an ouchie, but sometimes we need the ouch. The just checking in is where like donor relationships kind of go to die. And I say that with love, fundraiser. I mean, if your entire cultivation strategy is occasionally emailing a donor and saying, I'm just checking in, that's really not a strategy. That's like slow drift. And major gifts cannot be built on a slow drift. They need, intention and rhythm and curiosity and movement and leadership. And that doesn't mean that you pressure the donor. It doesn't mean that you force the relationship. And it doesn't mean that you turn into some weird fundraising robot who is always trying to push people to the next stage. What it really means is that you're thoughtful and prepared and you're paying attention, you're listening and creating meaningful opportunities for this particular person to get closer to the mission. Like, that is cultivation. It's not pestering or performing. Cultivation's not sending random updates and hoping the donor like magically becomes inspired. It's really about helping donors see themselves inside the story of your mission. Because when the donor can see the mission clearly, when they understand the need, when they feel connected to the people being served, when they can see the opportunity, and when they understand the role they can play, the ask starts to make sense. The ask stops feeling like this terrifying thing that you're just like springing on them. It becomes like the natural next step. So it's not an interruption in the relationship. It actually is an invitation. And that was one of the big themes of the morning. I think fundraisers need to hear that over and over because so many fundraisers walk around carrying this quiet shame about asking. We're told that, maybe asking for money is somehow impolite, or maybe they feel like the donor is going to be offended, or they feel like they're bothering people, or they feel like they're, working really hard to extract something. They feel like they're taking. But major gift fundraising, really well done is not taking. It's connecting someone's abundance to a mission that they care about. And it's giving someone the opportunity to act on their values and inviting them into meaning and just helping love and generosity in the world find a place to land. And that's really beautiful work. But if we treat the ask like it is shameful, donors feel that. Like if we act like we're embarrassed to ask, donors feel that too. And if we apologize our way through the conversation, that's not awesome either. And I do not mean that donors are just kind of sitting there judging every word that we say. But what I mean is that human beings can feel when another human being is uncomfortable. They can feel when we're trying to rush through the hard part. They can feel when we don't believe in our own invitation or that we're scared. So part of major gift confidence is learning to stand and be inside that ask. Not aggressively, not arrogantly, but just steadily with warmth and clarity and belief. One of the questions that came up in the morning was from someone who was newer to major gifts, and it was such a brilliant, honest question. She essentially asked, the donor knows I'm there because I want a gift. I know I'm there because I want a gift. So how do I make this relationship not feel transactional? I loved this question. This was the perfect question for her to ask because this is the question, isn't it? I hear it every day from my coaching clients is, how do you build an authentic relationship in a job where, yes, eventually you are going to ask for money? And this is exactly what I told her. The relationship feels transactional when the only thing connecting you to the donor is the gift. If the only reason you call is because you need money, yes, that is going to feel transactional. If the only time the donor hears from you is when you're asking for something, that's also going to feel transactional. If every conversation is secretly like this countdown to the ask, then that's also not going to feel awesome. But when you're genuinely curious about the donor, when you understand what they care about, when you remember what they tell you and you bring them meaningful opportunities, when you follow through, when you ask good questions, when you create space for them to talk about why the mission matters to them, the gift isn't transactional, it's relationship. It's not the whole relationship, and that's the difference. You're not there to pretend money is not part of the conversation. That's not really honest either. The donor knows you're a fundraiser. You know you're a fundraiser. Everyone knows why the relationship exists in a professional context. So why do we need to be sneaky about that? Fundraising shouldn't be sneaky. Fundraising is relationship work with purpose. Like you genuinely care about this person that you're asking for a gift from, and you care about the change they want to make in the world. And your organization can help them do that and do good along the way. Like, does life get better? No. Think about other professional relationships. A teacher has a relationship with a student and there's a purpose. A coach has a relationship with an athlete and there's a purpose. A doctor has a relationship with a patient and there's a purpose. Purpose does not make the relationship inauthentic. It gives it a reason to exist. In fundraising, the purpose is generosity in service of mission. So instead of being embarrassed by that, we can honor it. We can say, my job is to help people who care about this mission understand what's possible and decide whether they want to be a part of it. Like, that's not pushy or transactional or icky. It's actually leadership. And fundraisers should really kind of lead with that mentality. Now, after the conference, I received something that really stayed with me. So, Elena Nicholson, who chaired the AFP Santa Barbara and Ventura Symposium, emailed me and sent a reflection about the day. And I have to tell you, it gave me goosebumps. It meant so much because she captured something I hoped people felt in the room, but that you never really know until someone actually says it back to you. She wrote about this strange superstition in fundraising that the more experienced you become, the less vulnerable you're allowed to be. And I thought, that's exactly what it is. Because fundraising can make us feel like we're supposed to be perfectly polished all the time. We're supposed to have the perfect case statement, the perfect blazer, the perfect talking points, a perfect follow-up, the perfect answer when a donor says, let me think about it. And meanwhile, on the inside, our stomach is doing gymnastics. Like, we're nervous. We start to second guess ourselves. We are wondering if we're asking too soon or too late or too boldly or not boldly enough. And Elena, who's been in this profession for over 20 years, said something so important. The butterflies never entirely leave. It's the same when I ask for a major gift. I want every fundraiser listening to hear that. You're going to get nervous, and the butterflies never entirely leave. Confidence does not mean you never get nervous. Confidence means you know what to do with the nervousness. It means that you feel the butterflies and still make that ask. It means that your voice can shake a little and you can still be very clear. Confidence also means that you do not have to become some perfectly polished fundraising machine in order to be effective. You can be human, fundraiser. In fact, you should be human, because donors aren't looking for robots. They're looking for people they can trust. That's one of the reasons Elena's reflection moved me so much, because she said what I brought to the room was not another keynote, that it was a relief. And she used that word relief because I think that is what fundraisers today need so badly. Not more pressure, not more perfection, not someone standing on a stage saying, just be bold, as if boldness magically appears because someone said it into a microphone. Fundraisers need relief. They need someone to say, this work is hard because it is human. They need to hear things like, yes, asking can be scary, and no, that does not mean you're bad at your job. They also need someone to say, you do not need a magical formula. You just need practice and language and a rhythm, and you need permission to be real. And I love that Elena named the day as being less like a lecture and more like sitting across from a wise colleague over coffee. That's what we wanted to create that day. I don't think fundraisers need to be talked at. They need to be talked with, and they need space to ask real questions. And they need to be able to say, okay, but what if the donor says this? Or what if I already made the ask and it got weird? Or what if I know they care, but I cannot figure out how to move this relationship forward? Or what if they know I'm here to ask for money and I know I'm here to ask for money and I don't want the whole thing to feel transactional? These are the questions that matter. And those questions don't always come out in these traditional lecture style formats. They come out when the room is safe and people are laughing and we all care about each other's success. And they come out when someone speaks their truth. And it's important that we have areas, space, and time as fundraisers that we don't need to pretend that fundraising is all polished success stories, and maybe we just start admitting that sometimes we're just human beings trying to invite another human being into generosity. She also shared 3 takeaways that stayed with her, and I think they're worth talking about here because they really do summarize the heart of major gifts. The first one, go deeper, not wider. And I love this because how many of us have been told that the answer to a struggling major gift program is like a bigger portfolio? We need more names and more prospects and more people to cultivate and more people sitting in a database with capacity ratings. And listen, I love a good prospect list. You know I do. But a list is not a relationship. A database is not a donor strategy. And a bigger portfolio does not automatically mean a stronger program. Sometimes a bigger portfolio just means more shallow relationships and guilt and like more people like, oh, I haven't called this person, and more names sitting there on your desk, like judging you every time you open, your CRM or you see that list. And frankly, major gifts aren't built by collecting names. They're built on paying attention and going deeper with people who are sitting across the table from you. Like, who is already showing you that they care? Who is already leaning in? Who's already consistently giving? Who's asking good questions and showing up and introducing others to the organization? Who's responds when you talk about the vision, and who's waiting for someone to invite them into something bigger? This is where major gifts often begin. It's not with more names, it's with more attention. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by your portfolio, I want you to ask yourself, do I need more prospects or do I need to go deeper with the right people? Because those are not the same thing. You can have a portfolio of 150 and you can make a millimeter of progress on 150 fronts. Or you can pick 20 and close them before year end. Hey, fundraiser, before you sign up for another fundraising conference where you might leave with a good tote bag but zero strategy to raise more money, let me invite you to Major Gift Momentum. This is my private coaching group where you'll get weekly coaching calls with me, access to my full major gift curriculum, and a community that's actually moving the needle. Major Gift Momentum isn't based in theory, it's based in action. Members are closing 5- and 6-figure gifts within 3 months of joining. Heather just closed a $245,000 gift. Jacelyn just closed a $212,000 campaign gift. And Georgette just got a $500,000 commitment. All within 3 months of joining Momentum. Each of these Momentum members didn't think the donor would give that much, but once I taught them my method, they are raising money at a whole new level. So would you like in, fundraiser? If you do, go to heyfundraiser.com/momentum and let's get started. The second takeaway Elena named was ask sooner. And I know that this one makes every fundraiser sweat. We spend a lot of time talking about this. Many of us are professional cultivators. We will cultivate forever if left unsupervised. We will have coffee meeting after coffee meeting, and then lunch after tour after lunch, and then there's another coffee, and then there's a program event, then there's a small event, then there's the just checking in email, then I'm going to send a newsletter, then I've got the impact report. Then maybe if the moon is full and Mercury has not gone into retrograde, we might consider possibly mentioning the idea of a gift. Fundraiser, I say this with all the love in my heart. Sometimes what we call cultivation is actually avoidance, wearing like a nice shoes. Sometimes we're not being strategic and we're stalling and we're waiting until the ask feels comfortable. But the ask may never feel completely comfortable. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It means it matters and you care. Elena described the concept of permission-based fundraising as creating space for donors to comfortably talk about making a gift. And I really loved that framing, because asking sooner doesn't mean you're cornering a donor. It doesn't mean rushing or not building trust or blurting out an ask before the relationship's ready. It really means creating permission and space and just cracking that door open and saying, would it be okay if we talked about what a meaningful gift could look like? Or is this the kind of project that you would want to be invited to support? Another way to put it is, would you be open to a conversation about how your family might help lead this effort? It's not pressure, it's generosity. Because sometimes the donor is waiting for us to just start the conversation. They don't know what's needed, and sometimes they don't know what level of gift is meaningful, and sometimes they don't know that we see them as someone who could play the leadership role. Sometimes they need us to very clearly, respectfully, and lovingly open that door. So the ask isn't an interruption, it's an invitation. And sometimes it's an invitation the donor is hoping that you'll actually make. The third takeaway Elena named was the one she said she did not expect. I'd spent some time talking about not working 14-hour days because you need to invest in yourself and you need to live your life. Yes, I hope you all heard that, because frankly, donors aren't moved by perfectly polished professionals. They're not moved by people who are working 60, 70-hour weeks. I challenge the room to go experience their community. They need to go to the symphony. They need to go see that play that everybody's going to. They need to go to the food festival and see the movie that people are all talking about. They need to walk around the farmer's market and read that new book that just came out. And you need to have dinner with your friends. You need to get out from behind your desk because your donors are doing those things and you need things to talk to them about. Plus, you can see them out in public, which is also a lovely thing. And here's the crux. You can't really build human relationships if you've forgotten how to be human. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I gave that group was you need to go out and experience your community because you need things to talk to your donors about. They're going to go to the symphony. They're going to go to the food festivals. They're reading the books. They're serving on boards. They're trying new restaurants and they're traveling and they're living. And if you want to build real relationships, you also need to be a person who's alive in the world and not stuck at your desk all the time. And I know that sounds obvious, but a lot of fundraisers forget this. We get so caught up in the urgency of the work that we forget that part of our job is connection. Connection requires us to have something to connect about. This doesn't mean that you have to be fancy and that you need season tickets to every single cultural event in town. You don't need to suddenly become a wine expert or a theater critic or someone who says things like, the symphony was transcendent, unless that's truly who you are, in which case that's fantastic. It really just means that you need to be engaged in your community. See the local play, go to the newest museum exhibit, attend the festival, read your local paper. Go have a life, because donor relationships are not built only on mission updates and pledge reminders. You need to have those small moments of human connection with your donors. And these small moments are built when you can say, hey, I saw you across the room at the symphony. We didn't get a chance to say hi, but I wanted to send you an email because it was great to see you there. Like, what was your favorite part? So if you're raising money in a specific community, you need to be part of that community and understand its rhythm and what the people care about and understand where people gather and know the stories people are telling themselves about the place that they live, because major gifts aren't raised in a vacuum either. They're raised in community, in context, and inside a donor's life. So go live yours. That might be one of the least technical pieces of major gift advice that I've ever given, but I actually think it's one of the most important, because burned out fundraisers don't always build great donor relationships. Exhausted fundraisers who have lost touch with joy don't bring that same energy into donor conversations. If the only thing you talk about is your inbox and your database or your goal or your stress, that's not going to create much connection. So go out and live your life. Your humanity is not a distraction from the work. Your humanity is part of the work. It might be the deepest lesson of the day. And as Elena said in her reflection, sometimes the most important permission we need isn't from the donor. It's from ourselves. Permission to be human, permission to ask sooner, to go deeper, to stop waiting until we feel perfect, like permission to trust that we can be nervous and still be effective. That is what I hope people took away from that day. And that's why I'm so grateful to AFP Santa Barbara and Ventura counties for creating the kind of conference where those lessons could actually land. I also want to acknowledge something else Elena shared because credit does matter. And she talked about the event committee that helped her plan this conference. And they really challenged the chapter to focus on the kind of professional development that went deep and actually introduced them to asking for a gift. And I just loved it because this is what happens when chapter leaders and volunteers ask better questions around professional development. Not really just like, who can we get to speak, but what do our members really need? It's not, how do we fill the day and let's just see what proposals come in. They proactively created a day that changed what people feel capable of doing when they left that conference. It was different. It was so amazing. I've been going to AFP conferences for 25 years, and I have never seen a chapter be so devoted to major gifts. One of the things that they had challenged me to do as keynote was that everybody in that room needed to ask for a major gift that day. Just practice, just say the words. And so that's what we did. And it produced their whole thinking produced a different kind of conference. I mean, we talked about objections because that's part of major gifts. It's also one of the places where fundraisers lose a lot of confidence. They hear an objection and immediately translate it as rejection. If the donor says, I need to think about it, and the fundraiser hears, you're not good at your job, or the fundraiser says, that amount feels too high, and the fundraiser hears, how dare you ask me for that? The donor might say, I need to talk to my spouse. The fundraiser hears, well, this is over. We spend a lot of time on objections, and it's not always a no. It could be a request for more information. It could be a sign that the donor's interested but not aligned just yet. It could be timing or the amount, or that the donor has more questions, that they need more time. I mean, there's so many different things. But I want to thank the committee for just being so innovative when they were thinking about what their chapter needed. So during that morning, people also asked me very specific questions about solicitations that they have that are coming up or that they had recently been in. Like they asked things like, how would you phrase this? Or what would you say if the donor said this? What if I need to go back and ask again? Or I can't get somebody to take my call. And so we talked through my 3-step voicemail system. They asked, how do I invite them into something bigger without making it all about wealth and money? I mean, these are questions fundraisers need to work through. And you can't always work through them in like a 50-minute breakout session where there's 80 slides and 7 minutes for Q&A. That's why I loved this day. There was space. There was room to actually coach. I mean, in a weird way, it felt like a coaching session with 110 friends, which sounds chaotic, but it was quite joyful and it was hopeful. And honestly, it felt really useful for the people in the room. Fundraisers, they don't always just need more information. They need practice and language and be able to hear the words out loud and say the words out loud, and someone encouraging them to say, oh, maybe try it this way. That's why I teach 12 different ways to ask, because there is not one magical ask. There's not one script that works for every donor in every moment. Different donors need different invitations. Sometimes it's direct. Sometimes the ask is exploratory. Sometimes it's about leadership. Sometimes it's about solving the problem. None of those are wrong. They're just different doors into the conversation. AFP, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties, they were nimble and flexible, and they they responded to what their fundraisers wanted. I mean, they themselves were human and present. They created this like space to breathe. And they also did something that I thought was so smart. They bought every person who attended the conference a copy of my book so that they could take that book and use it in the future. They didn't want it to be like, oh, come learn for a day. They wanted it to be like, come learn for a day and then leave with some tools that you can keep using. And that really matters because we've all been to these conferences where we felt inspired in the room. And then 2 weeks later, we can't even remember 80% of what was talked about at that conference because your inbox is waiting and your next board report is waiting and you need to call this donor and all of the things just keep piling up. And they put a stake in the ground. Like, we want you to keep practicing. We want you to have language to use in your next donor conversation. We want this day to live beyond today. And this is a piece that I want AFP chapters to notice. Professional development really shouldn't end when people leave the room. The best professional development gives people a way to keep going. A tool, a framework, practice, shared language, something they can bring back to their team, something that they can open before a donor meeting and say, okay, which ask fits this moment? And honestly, the whole day was just such a blessing. The morning was practice and conversation. Then the afternoon was more learning. And the book was like the take home. And it was just such a smart model. So after we spent the entire morning together, we had a 45-minute lunch. And then there were 3 sessions that people could attend. They could continue on with me on a 60-minute major gift session. They had a 60-minute plan giving session. And they had a 60-minute on board engagement. And then the brilliant thing is they brought all of the people back together and had a major donor panel. So they spent 90 minutes talking to major donors in their area. This was fantastic. I just loved it. We talk about what donors want. We talk about what donors hate. We talk about whether donors read annual reports or do they like the newsletter or are they comfortable introducing us to their friends? We talk about if they want recognition or do they want more contact or less contact. This gave fundraisers the chance to hear directly from the people on the other side of the relationship. So there were 3 major donors at the front of the room. And the questions that these fundraisers asked were fascinating. One person asked, when you receive an annual report, do you actually look at it? Which, let's be honest, is the question every fundraiser is wondering when they spend weeks of their life gathering photos and stats and comma checking and all the things. I mean, do donors read it? Do they skim it? Do they look for their name? Do they want it digitally? Like, these are interesting things. They also asked, how does it feel when a nonprofit asks you to introduce them to your friends and neighbors? Such a good question because fundraisers get really nervous about asking for, prospect referrals. Like, we worry that asking for introductions feels presumptuous. We worry we're treating the donor's personal relationships like a prospect list. And sometimes we just ask for introductions badly. So setting up this day for, a big session in the morning, you can do one of 3 sessions in the afternoon, and then coming back for, a 90-minute session with major donors. This is something that I think AFP, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties nailed. They just understood what their members needed and didn't need. And we all know that major gifts are important. Major gifts are what actually can move the needle for your mission. And so this particular chapter wanted to help their fundraisers understand how to do major gifts, how to find the courage, how to build the rhythm, how to ask, how do I recover when it doesn't go well? How do I keep going when I hear no? Like, this is the work. And this is where chapters and associations can really make a huge difference. because local AFP chapters are in such a powerful position. They know their fundraising communities. They know what their members are struggling with. They know when people are burned out and when newer fundraisers need support and when seasoned fundraisers need a refresh. They know when the sector needs to gather and say, okay, let's get down to brass tacks here. And when a chapter creates a day like this, they're not just hosting an event. They are strengthening the fundraising ecosystem of the region. That may sound big and massive, but I mean it. I mean, every fundraiser in that room serves an organization, and every organization serves people, families, animals, students, patients, artists, causes that matter. And when you invest in a fundraiser skill, that investment does not stop with the fundraiser, it ripples. A fundraiser who leaves with more confidence might ask for a bigger gift. That bigger gift might fund a program. That program is going to change someone's life. And a fundraiser who learns how to cultivate with more intention might keep a donor engaged for years. They might stay in their job longer. That matters to me because we need good fundraisers to stay, not only in their job, but in our profession. We need fundraisers to feel capable and feel supported and stop thinking like, am I cut out for this job, when they've really never even been given the training, the tools, and the language. So that is why this day felt so meaningful to me. It wasn't just a speaking engagement. It felt like an investment. I mean, this AFP chapter invested in their people. And I want to see more of that. I wish I would have attended a conference like this 20 years ago. I want more AFP chapters to say, what is the thing that our members really need to get better at? And how can we create a day that actually helps them practice and grasp it? Maybe it's major gifts. I hope it's major gifts. Maybe it's board engagement or retention or storytelling. I mean, but whatever it is, go deep. Give people the time and the tools, the language, the practice, a book, a workbook, a framework. I mean, just something that they can take back to their office and share. Fundraisers are inspired by work that's happening in their organizations every day. They don't need to have a rah-rah session at every conference. They want to be equipped. And I think that really talks about the shift that I'm hoping to see. Inspiration feels good in the moment. I know that. We all know that. Equipping changes what people do next. And we need both. But if I had to choose, I would choose equipping every time, because the fundraiser who knows what to say is more likely to make the call. The fundraiser who has practiced the ask is more likely to actually ask. The fundraiser who understands objections is less likely to spiral after a no. And the fundraiser who has a relationship rhythm is less likely to let donors drift. That's the power of practical training. One of the reasons I love doing this kind of work is because I see people relax in real time. I mean, I was standing up in front of 110 people and I could see them feeling better about their jobs. I mean, at the beginning of the session, especially one about asking, people are a little tight, right? They're like, okay, what are we going to learn? They're kind of bracing themselves because asking for money brings up lots of emotions, fear, rejection. You know, money in itself has a lot of weight culturally. But then we started talking and we started telling stories and we laughed and we named the awkward and we practiced the words and we talked about what donors actually care about. And the fact that every fundraiser, even the good ones, they have weird meetings. And so slowly people started to breathe and you could feel the room loosen and they were nodding and asking questions. And, you know, people would stop me and say, okay, but what about this situation? And that's when, you know, the learning is getting real. Not when people are just like mainly taking notes, but when people start bringing their real problems into the room, this is when professional development becomes useful. That's what happened in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. People brought real questions. They weren't performing. They weren't trying to sound impressive. They were asking amazing questions that mattered to everyone in that room. And I think that's why the day felt so joyful. Joyful might sound like a funny word to use about major gift training, but I promise it was joyful because my hope is that people were feeling less alone, and that comes with relief. And when people have the tools, there's a sense of relief, and relief creates energy. And that's what I hope people took with them, is not just the tactics, not just the book, but like a sense of renewed possibility. I hope the newer fundraisers thought, okay, I can do this. And I hope the seasoned fundraisers thought, okay, I've got a new, fresh take on things. And I hope the people who have been hearing a lot of no's lately remembered that no is not always the end of the story. I hope people who have been stuck just checking in emails thought, I can lead this relationship more intentionally. And I hope someone got in their car after that conference and thought, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow morning when I sit down at my desk. Because that is the goal. No theory, not this is going to happen someday, but what can I do tomorrow? Okay, so fundraisers, I want to thank the AFP chapter of Santa Barbara and Ventura counties for having me. I want to thank the members, Elena, Kathy, Pete, Greg. I know there are other committee members that I'm missing, but I apologize for that. But thank you for creating space for conversation. Thanks for trusting that major gifts was important enough to deserve time and depth. Thank you for bringing in the donor voices. And thank you for giving every attendee a copy of a practical book that they can use after the conference. So I'm really grateful for you. I think you hit the nail on the head. And whether your AFP chapter creates a day like this or not, you can actually create your own practice. You can build your own confidence. You can take responsibility for the language you use with donors, and you can stop waiting for the perfect script and the moon stars all aligned and start building your own tool belt. Okay, fundraiser, we covered a lot. Think about your professional development. Think about what you really need. Talk to your AFP chapter about what you need. They are there to support you, and AFP is one of the best tools you can have in your tool belt. But sometimes they need to know what you need. So feel free to call somebody you know on your local AFP chapter and tell them. Okay, fundraiser, I'll see you next time. Fundraiser, thank you for being here. This work you do, it matters. You are the bridge between generosity and impact, and don't let anyone, including the hard weeks, convince you otherwise. If today's episode gave you something useful, please pass it along. One share, one text to a colleague, one review on Apple Podcasts. That's how this show reaches the people who need it most. Come find me at heyfundraiser.com, and I'll see you next Friday.